Comic-Con 2022 Winnipeg edition, the first of the new organizers edition, my thoughts and review and what I think they should improve for next year. Welcome back to Slow Roll. My name is Stephanie. Videos every Wednesday discussing disability reviews, and the day-to-day. As most of you are probably aware by now, we went to Comic-Con for the very first time this past weekend, and we thought it might be a good idea to give these first-time organizers a few things that we loved and a few things that we think they might want to improve on if they decide to keep on going and organizing Comic-Con 2023 in Winnipeg. There's a lot of pros and a few cons, not necessarily cons, but things that I would like to see improved. Some of them are specific to disability and people like me who are ambulatory wheelchair users, and some are simply event comments. As a past event organizer myself, I feel like I should speak about those things as well because, let's be real, I'm not just a person with disabilities. I have a background in events and I just had to speak on a few of those things as well. Now, let's start with the positives. The reality is, overall, the event was great. It was a really fun day for Luke and I. We had a great time, and the special guests, the actors and such that were there were some pretty big names. There was no one on our list for this year, but totally okay. A lot of our friends and family checked them out and loved their experience and said it was completely worth it. As for disability in general, the convention center is a fairly accessible place, and so we didn't have any major issues or things that I could not access, which is really nice. Parking was super streamlined with a full lot. They still had accessible parking available, and they even had that on their entrance sign, which I was really impressed with. Parking was easy. Elevators getting up to the show floor, buying tickets were pretty straightforward, and a pretty streamlined experience for the most part. Now, it's when we got to the second floor and tried to get ourselves quote unquote checked in that things got a little complicated. The biggest issue and the biggest thing I would like to see them improve for next year is just general signage. They just didn't have enough of it. Not only did they not have enough of it, but they probably needed a few more volunteers or people on the main floor. The second floor was supposed to be a general check-in where you got your wristband for the day. The people would ask you whether or not you had a general day ticket or a full weekend ticket, which I feel like is just asking for trouble. You should be checking people's tickets and seeing what they purchased and not expecting out of goodwill that they're just gonna tell you what they actually bought. Now, of course, we said we just had a day ticket, but I just thought that was a little weird that they didn't ask for our tickets at all. Getting to check-in on its own was a challenge. There was almost no signage, and it really was complicated as far as even getting there. It just wasn't marked. We had no idea. Everyone kept asking us for our wristbands, but no one was telling us where to get one or even how to get them. At one point, one of the staffers was just yelling wristbands and asking people to have their wristbands up in the air. And I just was so confused. And so once we finally did find the check-in zone and got ourselves our wristbands, at this point, we had been in the convention center, at the convention center, for a little bit more than a half hour. So it was quite the process. Not only that, but by the time we had figured this all out, we had been to an elevator and back like 3 times because they told us where the accessible elevator was, but never checked if we had wristbands. So we were actually told by security that we needed wristbands and not the actual convention staff, which was interesting. When we finally did get to the elevator, security from the convention center actually had to let us up to the 3rd floor because the 3rd floor is actually locked off for the elevators, which I thought for such a large event was a little strange. And the fact that the south building elevators were non-accessible, as in they just weren't being used, which made for a fairly large bottleneck. Once you did get to the floor, you definitely felt the vibe of the convention with all the cosplayers and everyone dressed up. It was a really cool experience. I've never been to a convention like this one before, so it was a really fun experience. Signage pros, as soon as you walked into the main floor, they had a couple maps, and they also had paper maps that you could take to have a sense of where people were from booth to booth, which was really good. But with the amount of humans in this room, yes, it's a huge floor. The main hall up in the 3rd floor of the convention center, if you haven't been, is absolutely monstrous. And so there wasn't a lack of space, but considering the amount of humans that were in the physical room, traveling and moving around became a bit of a challenge. I don't know how many tickets were sold or how many people were physically in that room at peak early afternoon on Saturday, but it was insane. The amount of people just trying to get from A to B, not really knowing where to go or what was going on. By the time you get into a row, you'd lose track of where the booths were because you couldn't even see them. There was just so many people. As a person in a wheelchair, some people realized I was there, others didn't, and so they'd go in front of me. I probably ran over a couple people's heels, sorry. But the reality was there was just so many people, and my chair can only go so slow or it just doesn't go. So I had to keep some type of pace going or else I'd get stuck everywhere, which I did quite a few times. Nobody's fault, it was just really busy. Recommendation, I don't know that I would sell as many tickets as they did for the afternoon, but I also understand that people come and go and have weekend passes and all of those things. So I also understand that side of it too. But holy Hannah, was Saturday chaotic. If you're a person who doesn't like massive crowds, I know Friday was a little bit less busy. I haven't heard what Sunday looked like just yet, but I would expect that Saturday would be at peak day, just considering all of the photo op opportunities, signing opportunities, and things like that that only happen on Saturday. Now, their Ghostbuster booth and Star Wars booth were absolutely the coolest things ever. I was so gobsmacked when I saw them. Some of the booths, however, were a little bit lost. I don't know how much people paid to exhibit at Comic-Con, but I would have liked to see some type of divider between the booths. I know that when we did booths at some of our larger events, we would get drape and roping done. I know it adds a cost, but it just elevates the booths and the look of everything just a little bit more, helps divide sections, and just allows for a better buying experience. When there's so many vendors, it's so easy to lose track of just chairs and tables and random stuff everywhere. It was a little jumbled. Maybe I'll use that word. Again, to the signage, we couldn't really figure out where we were at certain times because you'd lose track of booths because of the amount of people. But as far as booths that we were looking for, there were a few vendors of Pokemon cards, and so we were glad to find them eventually. And we did purchase a few things at Comic-Con. I would definitely recommend that they take a look at their corners and general choke points of the center of the room, where for some reason, random garbage cans were found everywhere, and they'd always be in the worst place possible in these corner choke points. And with my wheelchair, it made it even harder for me to make some of those corners. And so I would recommend that they put them around corners or put them near places people would actually need them, like where the food was being held and things like that. General seating was also a huge dilemma. People were scattered around the entire convention center finding any wall they could to sit on the floor because there was absolutely no seating anywhere to be found. I would love to see a lounge space of some sort where people can sit and wait while they wait maybe for the next show to start or things like that, or have a larger kind of dining and or food space where there's tables and chairs. I know when we went to the wedding show in January a few years back, they had a huge general area of seating, which was really nice to be able to grab something to eat and have an actual seat somewhere. That area at the Comic-Con wasn't very large and just didn't allow for a lot of room to maneuver. So the hallways got really cramped, and with my chair, it just made it a choke point no matter who was trying to get around me. Now, all in all, I am fairly nitpicking at this point, but there is one major thing that really drove me crazy, and it was as we were leaving. We tried to leave via one set of elevators. That didn't work out, so we went to the general elevator where our actual parking was, and the elevator was working, and for some reason, it was taking forever for the elevator to get back up to the 3rd floor because it was locked. And so essentially what would happen is it would bounce between the lower level parking and level 1, 2, but would never make it back up to 3 because people needed to get to different floors. And as the only working elevator to get people like myself or parents with strollers down, a queue quickly followed, and a fairly long one. It took us about a half hour to get out of the 3rd floor and get down to the parkade just because of the amount of people that needed to use the elevator. On top of that, I'll be frank, there's quite a few people that were using the elevator that probably didn't need to, which wasn't helping the problem. I would have loved to have seen an attendant try and actually maneuver traffic around that zone. Because it was around a corner, there was everyone trying to sit on walls. And so there was just a lot of people in this very small space. And the reality of it, it was supposed to be used as an elevator space, and it just wasn't being able to be used that way because of the amount of people around. And so I would highly recommend putting an attendant or someone to direct traffic and to help direct traffic of people who don't necessarily need to use the elevator, to send them to somewhere else to try and get down to other floors. Once you get to the 2nd floor, you have 4 elevators to choose from, whereas at the 3rd, there was only 1 being used. So that was probably my biggest pet peeve of the day, to be completely honest with you. Overall, like I said, we had an absolutely great time. And I think they are very close to a great experience, but they're just not quite there yet. I look forward to going again next year and checking out the improvements and seeing how things go with their 2nd Comic-Con if they decide to move forward. From the looks of it, the dates for 2023 are already out, and we hope that it continues that way as they compile their final finances and all that fun jazz as the weekend is over. I hope it was worth it for Winnipeggers, and I hope that everyone had an absolute great time. I heard pretty much only positive things while we were there, and mostly positive things in the comments of the posts that I did read. So good on you for our first great show. And I hope you guys take my criticism as just that, something you guys can improve on. If you guys have liked this video and liked this review and you'd like us to review other events like this one, please leave us a like or a comment down below. And if you haven't already, we'd love a beautiful subscribe. We'll see you next week. Don't forget to slow your roll. Want to check out some other reviews we've done on different products? Check out this list.